panel, we would like to address a serious problem in today's society of claimed professionals claiming to provide healthcare treatment, but actually not only endangering the health of the people they claim to serve, but also jeopardizing the future of, basically hindering the development of the medical community at large. What we would like to propose in this motion today is to ban all businesses, basically, that offer physical healing as one of their objectives if they do not agree to subject themselves to an objective test by the government that will prove that it is at least marginally more effective than placebo. We are talking about things like Kabbalah healing, Theta healing, frequency healing, coffee reading healing, psychic healing, anything that was not proven by the medical community to be actually effective. Before I move on to our points, do we have any clarifications? Oh, not yet. Oh, 5 more seconds. Then never mind. Our point in this debate, basically, is that professionals who claim to offer a service, especially one as important as personal health, to the public, should have evidence that their practice is actually working. We would like to liken that to an architect, right? An architect would not claim to build a building if it is not safe, if he does not have evidence that the building is safe for the people who are going to live in it. Before I move into my points, is that a clarification?
Are you going to include religious organizations?
Yes, so long as they claim they open up a business, note, a business, trademark, LTD, etc., and claim to offer healing services, but do not subject themselves to a medical test. Yes. Moving on, our points are going to be as follows. Why people seeking out this healing treatment is mutually exclusive to them seeking out actual medicine, or at least largely mutually exclusive, like they will seek a lot less proper medicine. Why these treatments are inherently worse than proper medicine, and also why they are basically principally immoral, whether these people believe that they're making an effect or not. My partner will elaborate more about the practical effect of this policy, why these healing businesses will not just go under the radar and basically be behind our supervision. Let's move on. Why it is mutually exclusive to seeking out medicine? Well, we feel that when a person goes to those healers, to those theta healers, etc., and basically want to be healed, they are already feeling like they're doing something for themselves. These professionals, supposed professionals, will promise them to heal them, will promise them that they will walk out of there within 3 months, 6 months, whatever, completely healed. And there is absolutely no need to go to conventional medicine, which is often portrayed by these people as either backwards or unsupportive or many other things that will be detrimental to the patient. So these patients will already feel like they're doing something for their own health. The problem is that they don't have the time and the money to do both, right? People who are in serious health conditions have already many expenses, have already a job they have to keep a job to basically support themselves, and they just don't have the time to go to both chemotherapy sessions and a theta healing session. And we believe that these supposed professionals it is their interest to keep those customers with them and not let them go to conventional medicine, right? Because they are private practices, they do business. It is their interest to draw their patient out for just one more treatment, just one more session before the actual effect comes into place, because they want to draw out all the more money from these people. So not only when they make their customers feel like they're doing something for their own health, they will always draw them out a little more, also using things like a very significant pathos, like words like the cosmic balance will be altered and you will never heal properly unless you go to one more treatment, or using their religious authority to compel their customers to staying with them. We believe that is why people are less likely to go to medical treatment once they've started this, or they might go just too late, which moves me on to my second point. Why it is inherently worse? Now let's talk about the medical community for a second. The state medical community, even though there are different practices, like different parts of the body, etc., they are all one community, and they share statistics and they share research, and their common goal is to further medicine using the same language of like cells and atoms, etc. The problem with those private practitioners is that they not only speak in different languages, like Kabbalah healing versus frequency healing versus homeopathy, etc. They have a competitive interest to keep each other out of their achievements, right? So not only are they inherently incapable of sharing their information because they speak in different terms, they also will not want to, because they compete with each other over the same bank of customers, and they will not want to basically share their success with others in order to further the community. They will want to further only themselves. The problem with that is that even when we find a treatment that might be successful, they will not share it with others. People will not know, other practices will not know, and this community will not go forward in treating customers. And the regular medical community, the conventional medicine, will be deprived from statistics that could actually be used to further medical research. That is a very big problem. And we also say that when a person basically goes to these private practices, since they believe that they're getting treated, they tend to ignore any worsenings in their situation, or at least the practices will tell them it has to get worse for it to get better, right? It hurts because we're drawing out the humors in your body, etc. So they are less likely to notice any infections or detrimental effects of the medical condition that will set in while those private practices are doing their thing. And because they are basically they don't have substantial evidence that it works, it is likely that these infections will set in and basically mean that when they do get to a doctor, when they do get to a hospital on the break on their deathbed, it means that it will be too late. It means that those people who are the private practices who are not supervised by the state are also likely to, statistically, right, there will be more frauds among these people, right? Because medicine and doctors are always supervised by the state. They have tests, they have a state paycheck if they work in a hospital, etc. They are much more supervised. These private practitioners, we cannot measure their success because they won't let us. And we also don't speak the same language. We don't speak theta healing, right? So there's a lot more likely for at least some of these people to be fraudsters. And POI, quick?
No.
Okay. Let's move on to why it is inherently immoral. Fine. So we say there are two types of private practices here. There are people who actually believe that what they're doing is helping people, and there are people who basically commit fraud and exploit these people. Now we say that this second group is obviously very bad, right? Because we use a person with religious authority or spiritual authority, or basically a lot of pathos, to compel people to pay them money for a service that they know does not work. But we say that the people who actually believe that their treatment is working are also detrimental to us because it is the equivalent of medical malpractice. Just like a doctor will not offer a treatment that he has not tested, a drug that he has not tested, a drug that basically he doesn't necessarily know what's in there, but he believes very strongly that it might work because the angels told him so or something. We believe that just like such a doctor will not be allowed to give that treatment to a patient, we should not allow these supposed professionals to give treatment to patients that they don't know if there is sufficient evidence that supports. Now, we say that basically there is a value in placebo, right? Patients' happiness is important, but we put the patient's health over their happiness because they will have more happiness for the long term if they're healthy, and also we want more statistics for the medical community to develop later. That is why we call upon you to propose.
I thank Tom for that speech, and now thanks for one speaker on the opposition side for Tom Johnson.
I've got some clarification to start with, then some rebuttal, and then three main points. Firstly, some clarifications. We're still okay with doctors, adverts in the NHS and other public health services saying that these treatments aren't effective. We're perfectly happy with this. We're perfectly happy with them to contradict what things like faith healers are saying. We are just not forcing people to deny their identity in the delivery of their services. Secondly, the only people not using standard healthcare alongside traditional faith healing and so on and so forth, cultural sort of mechanisms of healing that are believed to work, are the truly devout to those religions and those cultures. It's very rare. There are a minority of people that only use these unproven faith healing practices without standard healthcare alongside them. We think there is a minority, and we think, as I'm going to explain later, these people are going to continue to use them, but in a much worse way. First piece of rebuttal, we think the distinction in religious organisations attempted to bring by owning government is fairly arbitrary, and that non-business-based religious organisations are clearly within this debate. We think even within the substantive of their speech, they still include religious organisations that are businesses. We just think this is important to note. Firstly, to establish why is identity important. So obviously identity is something you hold dear. It is exactly what shapes your existence. It is what you perceive as you. So it's formed through a variety of ways, mainly through your upbringing. And upbringing has an enormous effect on what you perceive to be your identity. And a large part of upbringing is things like cultural traditions, traditions based from your ethnicity, traditions based from your religion. Things like religion and ethnicity are enormously important in forming identity, and large parts of religions, in some circumstances, are these are these faith healing practices, and so on and so forth. To deny people to use these practices, to deny part of their identity, something that they hold, as I have established, very, very dearly.
Sir.
Yes.
Okay, these practices are often so detrimental to you, and they're a threat to your identity, because at the point where you do not realize that you are not being given real medicine, it means that you are very likely to die, meaning that your identity will just not be there because you're dead.
So, we think that people, as I've mentioned, most people use faith healing practices alongside standardized medicine, where problems with the faith healing practices can be identified and fixed as they're going along. Most people don't get to a situation where they're dying from faith healing practices. It is very, very rare. As I'll go on to explain later, this is still going to happen, except in a much worse way. Cultural ostracisation is what leads to an identity being denied. So, a large part of the groups that use fairly unproven faith healing and other such practices as a medical practice tend to be immigrant, ethnic, or religious populations. They tend to either, in the case of immigrant ethnic population, have brought their culture with them. They have immigrated to the West, and they have brought a culture from where they have come, which they hold very dearly. They see it as part of them, they see it as part of their identity, differentiates themselves from the country that they are now residing. What happens when you say that you can no longer say this works, in fact you've got to say this doesn't work, this is quite possibly harmful, that you're saying that what you have done for your entire life, what you see as part of you, is wrong, it is detrimental to you. It's incredibly harmful to people, and especially, as I've mentioned, considering that most people tend to do it alongside standardised medical practices, not leading to that, to terrible outcomes. Also, in the case of religious organisations, the religious identity, things like the Catholic Church, teach that that faith can heal things. Now, to deny people the right to believe this is incredibly harmful. So, saying that the state is now in a position where it's saying, so not only is this probably not a sensible idea, we are banning you from saying it might be a sensible idea, banning you from saying that what is part of your identity could possibly work to help you. Obviously, we feel that this leads to feelings against the state. If you come from a religious or ethnic or immigrant population, it's likely that you're already somewhat ostracised from the state. The state somewhat doesn't represent you because you're a minority. The state tends to represent majorities. This means you're less likely to engage in what the state has to say, because the state is now denying part of you. It's saying part of what you believe, part of what you've always been told, part of what your culture has always told you is correct, is wrong. This means you're less likely to engage in the state. And especially in religious and ethnic groups, this is incredibly damaging. As I said, they already tend to live in very ostracised positions. So things like child services, police and education services already tend to be fairly alien to certain groups. These make the fact of just denying people's identity, part of people's identity, just puts you in a position where you're far less likely to engage in some things that they have to say. Which obviously we perceive as very important. We think things like police education and child services are very important in this debate. More importantly, though, we think health services in this debate are incredibly important. And we think what will develop when you deny people, so as I pointed out already, most people are using standard health services alongside them. These people now have half of what they're using as a health ceiling. The health healing practice is being denied from them. They're more likely to go against the state, as I've explained, and less likely to use standard healthcare services. And the people who aren't using standard healthcare services are likely to be using, and are only using things like faith healing practices solely, are going to continue to use these. And they're going to continue to use these in a black market forum. They're going to start using these practices without any protection the state can offer. So the state at the moment can offer protection through standard healthcare services, through some level of regulation of faith healing practices and so on and so forth. Now the state has no way of ensuring that black markets can't exist. They have no way of ensuring that these people can be regulated and that these health services, these claimed health services, can operate in a safe manner. These people are being pushed into using a black market service which is far more damaging than something that probably doesn't work already, because now it has no attempt at regulating. These people have been ostracised from the state. We don't want to ostracise them further. Beg you to oppose.
I thank George for that speech. I'd like to now ask the second speaker on the proposition side to continue the case.
Yeah, Khali, actually. We have today people who commit fraud, who commit malpractice, who endanger the health of the people that they are so-called helping. We did not hear a sufficient response about the serious health risks that people are under because of this proposition, because of status quo, and we'd like to hear more engagement in that in the future. I'm going to talk about the importance of social legitimacy in the success of alternative healing, and basically answer this idea of like backlash against the state and a black market, and why this will effectively help people who are currently using this not use this in the future. But first, let's go to rebuttal. First of all, the leader of the opposition says that most people use both. Completely not engaging with 4 reasons we heard from the Prime Minister about time, money, the interests of business, authority, and misunderstanding of the authority use, about the less and how health deteriorates over time, and we feel that that's a false improvement of health. Not engaging with all those reasons that make people not go to both, and more importantly, even if they do, delay it to a longer time and deteriorate their health until they actually seek the right health treatment, especially if we're buying into their case about identity and religious worth, then that even means that they don't see the use of going to the health care system in the first place if they don't believe in the state, if they only believe in the religious leaders, if that doesn't even work in their own case, right? We say that we gave to you an important criteria about fraud and malpractice, saying that if these people are causing significant harm because of the fraud and malpractice that they're committing towards their so-called patients, then we as a state have to ban it in order to save the lives and the health of the people that we as a state have to protect. And we didn't hear any sufficient answer to that as well. We also tell you that there are medical statistics and supervision that occur when practices are done under state regulation, and that when these people will agree to submit their practices to the state, we think that is important in order to if people continue to use this, to actually help them and reach better health treatment, and we didn't hear an answer to that as well. We hear from the leader of the opposition this idea of identity, right? So we have 2 answers to this. First of all, let's say a tattoo is an important part of my identity. Would we still let someone go to an unhygienic tattoo parlor that risks their health in order to continue and do their tattoo? No, of course not. The same goes for religious leader. We've heard a mischaracterization here of these communities. We say that they have strong religious identities. We accept that. But the thing is that they have a strong core towards religion, towards the idea of faith. And we are not going here against faith. That is not in the debate. We're going here against a certain minister that is a fraud minister that is telling their followers that if they do a certain practice that is endangering to them, then they will actually be healed by Jesus. Most ministers don't say that. Most imams don't tell their leaders, tell their followers to do dangerous, risky, healthy things, or to even do these practices. They go to the mosque, they go to the church, and they talk about religion, and they talk about identity, and they talk about maybe the idea of faith and prayer, but they do not go into that, make that next step of actual practices in order to help them be solved with the disease. And we think that this will push out those kind of ministers and actually make the ministers that don't do these practices stronger, and those followers will go to that, and I'll go into that to my point. About this idea of backlash against the state. 2 answers to that. First of all, status quo. I mean, today people feel that if they're a religious minority, that they're in some kind of a contention with the state. We don't see the big difference with that. And again, we want to emphasize that the state is not going against their belief. They're not saying that your belief is bad, and they're not saying that faith is bad. They're saying specific people who conduct dangerous things should not be allowed to do so, and we will ban them from doing so. So let's talk about the importance of social legitimacy and the success of alternative healing. So who looks at healing? We want to talk about two main groups. First, religious followers engaging with First Stop, and secondly, like new age trend and people who like to have critical attitudes towards the health system. So regarding religious followers, we say first of all, they are we say that we're talking about the fraud religious leaders. We say these are a minority of the sects of religious, right? We say that there's a mischaracterization. We say that most people actually go to religious leaders that give them like good empowerment and ideas about the state and talk to them about political critical issues, and only the minority are going in like to problematic leaders. If there's any POI from second especially, I'd be happy to take it. Secondly, we say that there's a growing market of new age, this new age trend. We see like health magazines, celebrities, TV shows, and unlike the religious minority that's a minority within a minority, this is a growing trend where many people now think that it's very cool to go to health, like alternative health, and it's something that is considered like idolized by celebrities and TV shows and health magazines, and we see this a lot. We say, any POI? Someone? Okay. So we say that social legitimacy means this means that social legitimacy is a deciding factor in deciding if I go to this health care. Because first of all, if we're talking about the trend idea, then it's a trend, right? It's part of being a progressive narrative. It's part of being like socially cool. The idea that I'm critical to like the health system. We say that this is important for people in their decision. And in the religious case, we say that we're not telling people to lose their religious identity. We're telling people your religious identity is strong. You shouldn't go to a fraud minister. Now we say that social legitimacy will be significantly harmed because the state, first of all, because the state is now saying that they're against this practice. They're saying that this practice is malpractice, that this practice is fraud. It is negative. It is not positive. And it is not cool and trendy. It is not connected to your religion. It's actually endangering you. And this is a message that they were not hearing before. They were hearing a counter narrative either from their minister or from popular culture telling them that this was cool and good for you. So we're saying that finally they're getting a good negative message. Secondly, they're taking an extra step to seek out the health that they need. And we say, after we've proven to you that social legitimacy is an important factor, that means that they don't want to make that extra effort in order to go to someone that's like under the radar, that's not approved, that doesn't have the social legitimacy, just like I won't go to a tattoo parlor that isn't healthy, that isn't with the certification. So we say that once we've given you that people are looking for social legitimacy, now see that it's negative, now have to take the extra step, they're not going to go to these black market health alternatives, they're going to make themselves much healthier, we're going to save people from risky diseases, and therefore we're proud to propose.
I thank Anthony for that speech. I would also like to remind people that it is allowed to make points of information. And I would like to move on to the next speaker in this
What the previous speaker misses in Josh's speech is that he says that the people who use these things often aren't using them exclusively, right? It isn't the case that people who follow celebrities are blindly doing so and don't interact with the NHS in any way, shape or form, right? It isn't the case that in, say, certain West African communities, people don't interact with the equivalent of the NHS or whatever it is elsewhere, right? They don't interact with health services, right? They do, because they're aware that those things can provide useful things above and beyond cultural healing and faith healing, right? They miss the fact that people who engage with those things in the status quo might be less likely to do so, the point at which things that they feel are important to them and the ideas that come behind those are important to them are taken away. I've got 2 points. One is the importance of ideas, right? And why the idea that this thing has a physical impact upon you is very important to individuals within those communities. The second is the impact upon minority cultures, I gave the West African example, but also minority religious cultures, right? And how cultures are built and things like that. Yes, that's what I'm doing. Right. So, firstly, the importance of ideas. How do you build ideas? How is the culture built and your identity built around it? Right? If your identity and your idea says that it is important to us that it's a particular cultural medical practice, regardless of whether we know whether it works or not, right? We have to feel that it works. We say that it is our culture that this thing has always worked in the past, or has worked for some reason in the past, or we believe that it works, right? That idea becomes central to the narrative that you build around yourself, right? Becomes central to the existence that you have. Because you're brought up believing that it has a physical impact, right? You're brought up believing that these things are physically powerful and have an impact on your life, and should you choose to go to them, they might make your life better, right? No, thank you. When you're told that that isn't true by the state, when you're told that the thing that you believe to has a physical impact is in fact not only potentially doing nothing, but might in fact be harmful to you, you feel that that is an attack against yourself, right? Because your self-identity is built around the ideas that you're brought up with. It's built around these ideas that you're imbued within childhood, right? That the idea that this has a physical impact. When you're told that it doesn't, when you're told that it might be harmful to you, there's an attack on that idea that you hold so very dearly to yourself, right? It's an attack on that person's personhood. One second.
Yeah, I told you that the core is the religion, and you're not attacking the religion itself.
Right. So, firstly, that is one part of this debate, religious groups. There's also cultural groups which you miss, right? And secondly, right, religious groups often do have a call that says physical impact has happened if you go to your priest for, used to be for exorcisms, right? It still is in some places, where if you go to your priest and ask for an exorcism, you will be physically healed, right? That is something that they believe to be strongly true. This isn't just a minority belief held by a very small number of people. So it's society is even widely accepted within modern day Catholicism. People believe that certain things that their priest can do has a physical impact on their life. Right. So what's the impact on those minority cultures? Right? So it is often the case that these communities are isolated, right? As Josh brings you, as some extent is conceded by the government. They often are isolated, and they often feel that the state disagrees with them. But that is not to say that they don't interact with the state at all, right? Because culture is a multifaceted thing, right? You can recognise your own culture, but at the same time go, the police are like useful to me when they stop gang raids, right? But when the state says to you that the idea that you hold dearly isn't true, that it is wrong or bad or just false, right? You feel that is an attack on the idea that you brought up. Because these communities are often insular, that is an idea that is held by many people within that environment. It's something that they're saturated with an environment of, right? They're told that the faith healer in their community is going to be helpful to them if they go to. They're told that if they meditate or something, right, they're going to have a physical impact and make them feel better, right? When you tell them, and that they're told this from childhood, right? It's something that they're brought up believing very, very strongly, because that's something that their culture they identify very strongly with. When they're told that can't be true, and it changes, and that is the state saying that that's true, not true, right? It is the state telling them that you cannot say this is true anymore, because it isn't. It's the state telling you that the facet of your identity is not only untrue, but probably wrong. You feel that state is making an attack against you. As a result, these groups are going to feel that the state is attacking them. And if they feel that their state is attacking them, are probably somewhat less likely to trust the state when police do things like interventions. Right? They're somewhat less likely to go to an NHS equivalent provider, right? Go to the health service when they're feeling sick for something that can't be cured for faith healing, right? Or they believe can't be cured by that, right? Or recognise the importance of modern medicine in certain things. They're less likely to go to that because the state has said to them a facet of your identity that you strongly believe in is wrong. It has made an attack against you, an attack against your community. As a result, you're probably less likely to go to those things. Anyone closing out POI?
Fraud and malpractice are criminal offences. Please engage with the fact that we've proven to you that this is malpractice and fraud.
I mean, if they're criminal offences, presumably they're prosecuted under the status quo. I'm assuming the criminal offence is prosecuted under the status quo as being a crime, right? Isn't a new act for the state to do. I think we're fine if you can prove their fraud in a court of law under the status quo, they are prosecuted, right? We're probably talking about things that are hard to prove, right? Because we're talking about things it's hard to prove a physical effect from, sometimes, right? We think if people are actually committing fraud under the status quo, given that that's illegal to commit fraud, they're probably being arrested under the status quo. It's probably not what this debate is about, right? It's about marginal communities where it's difficult to do that. It's about the fact that when you tell people things are wrong, it takes away a brick of their culture. It takes away something that their identity is built around. And it is done by a specific actor, right? That's the point of this House Wood. It's the point of an actor doing that. It's the state doing that. You're engaging with things like the NHS, right? When you're engaging with the police because you feel the state has made an attack against you, has direct impacts on the lives of people in those community, right? If they're less likely to engage with the police, if they're less likely to engage in social services or health services, right, that has a direct negative impact on those people's lives, right? Because if you don't engage with child services, it might mean the children who are not necessarily having the best environment aren't looked in on as often. It might mean that when crimes are committed, they're more likely to go unreported. It might well mean that when people went to the faith healer previously and didn't necessarily have any success, but still felt they could go to the NHS because the state trusted them and the state valued them, right, now feel that the state is attacking them. So they're less likely to go, and they're more likely to not interact with them, and might actually be more likely to die. It leads to massive negative impacts on the lives of people within communities. Close on.
I thank Matthew for that speech, and would now like to move on to the second half of this debate, and first Ulrika and Rasmus.
Madam Speaker, we think that both of these things, right, homeopathic medicine and also just getting medicine from the stem, do not necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. Right? But even if they are, right, we're going to prove that we can still take this debate on the government side. We think that even if all of the impacts that the opening tells you are true, right, we think that these impacts can never stand if we do not have a principal justification, that we can intervene with you on an individual, that we can tell you as an individual that there's something that you cannot do in an extreme case where you're very likely to die. If we cannot prove to you that, we think that we can take this debate. So, before I tell you why this works on the principle level, 5 points of rebuttal, right? Firstly, they talk a lot about like religious community and identity. Here's the comparative here. For religious people, Madam Speaker, the state has never been the utmost authority, right? As they already explained, these people listen to their priests, right? They don't care that much about what it is that the state says, because it is already status quo that we do not recognize these treatments as, you know, as something, as legitimate, right? We think that we cannot prioritize, you know, maybe more state engagement from Christian people or something like that. That's probably not going to happen. Over the fact that we legitimize fraudulent actions, we will never stand for that, right? We are not taking it away from these religious people, right? We think that these people will still do it, they will still do it within their inner communities. We're just banning it from, from being a business practice, from being an organizational practice. You can still have your rituals at home, you can still use the homeopathic medicine that your grandma made you, right? We are okay with that. We think that the impact here is minor on their side, right? Because, you know, all this identity problem that they are talking about is minor when you compare it to the fraudulent abuse, when you have hundreds of companies which claim that they have amazing healing powers, which use this to abuse individuals when they're extremely emotionally distressed. We think that that's the biggest problem here, right? We think that religious people sort of like, even if they talk about, you know, health services and how these individuals will go to the black market, right? Again, we think that religious people already do it, right? And even if we like sort of have that, we think that we recognize that people might be very, very desperate in some cases and go to the black market. We think that there's nothing that we are not going to do about it, right? So let's say they still claim that identity is important on a principle level, right? We think that first we have to recognize that we have never recognized all identities as legitimate, right? We do not recognize you being a pedophile legitimate, just because it is your identity, right? And Madam Speaker, please, I'm not making a comparing legitimate people with pedophiles, right? I'm talking about identity on principle level, right? But secondly, this is not a direct attack on religious people, right? This is a direct attack on malicious practices, on fraudulent practices, right? And thirdly, yeah, as I already said, impact on identity is not measurable and noticeable here, right? Because we think that these people might be more likely to engage state, but not be more likely to engage state. The impact that is noticeable is that you just no longer have people advertising fake homeopathic medicine and abusing others on a fraud. So what is the principal justification here, right? Because we think that as a state, we can sort of limit you from engaging in any practice at the point where you think that like this practice has a malicious intent, right? We're not going to let you like sort of post lottery if you think that you're going to scam people from their money, right? We just ban this kind of practice because we do not think that we can have them, right? We think that like you as a state, right? The fact that you provide business infrastructure to businesses, meaning that the business can go out there, can operate, right? They have the protection of the state, they have the protection of the police if somebody breaks into you, they have legal protection because they can use the state facilities, means that we as a state have a responsibility to ensure that this infrastructure and things that we provide people on a principal level aren't abused in a way as to abuse other people who are in worse situations, right? We think that like even if they say, oh, like, but not all these people are malicious, right? Some of these people might be, like these healers who actually believe that they will help, right? If that's true, man, we think that they are very likely to do this on their own, right? If they do this within their community, right, to people without getting paid because they want to help them, we think that they'll do this. What we're not going to do though is we're not going to let these people claim something that they haven't proven they can do and take money from people who think that it's going to help them and it's not right. How does this compare with opening, Madam Speaker? We think that like impact justification never works, right? Unless you can prove that you can do it on a principle level. We think that on an impact justification, it would make sense for us to take money from all the people, right, and just distribute it equally, right? The reason why we not do it because we think that on a principle level you have some sort of rights to self-property and things like that. We think that it's similar in this case, right? Secondly, so if this debate is not sort of like about these religious communities and identities that closing is talking about, what it is, we think that this necessarily boils down to extreme cases, right? I'm talking about cases where people are so desperate, right? We think that these are the majority of cases where you have the biggest impact because a lot of people, right, they suffer from so horrible diseases, right? When they have exhausted all the possible options that you have from the state, right? They have gone to all the clinics, tried all the medicine, and at this point, right, these people are so desperate they don't know what to do, right? Which is when they're very likely to turn to these things because they need like some way, at least some kind of way they might be able to tackle this, right? We think that like the principle in this case, right, is that people who are in the worst possible situation to be abused, right, are the people who we need to protect because these people. Why is that the case? Is these people are in the worst possible situation? We think that these people, firstly, are extremely emotional in this case, right? Because you literally have tried everything that the state has able to provide you, right? You might have gone to drug trials and things like that. At this point, like you're so desperate, you're willing to give away any money, right? You're willing just to go out there and borrow a lot of money just for a single chance, like to have this life-saving treatment. Before I move on, opening.
So, irregardless of whether these people can get. Whether they're allowed to say these services work or not. Surely these people you're talking about now are just going to still use these services. They're not going to stop using them because they're now not allowed to publicly.
But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't ban them, right? At the point where people have a malicious intent to scam money out of people who are in horrible situations, doesn't mean that we shouldn't ban them just because these people are going to go to the black market, right? We think that people are desperate. They'll still do this regardless of what we do. We're just not going to make them legitimate. That's our case. Listen, right? We think like these people can be extremely abused in these cases, right? At the point where they take out loans, borrow money just for a single chance, so other people can abuse them, right? We think that the impact is that these people might pay anything. We think that this is really bad, right? But secondly, even like we think that we think it's legitimate if these people like go to the black market, right? We think that nothing we can do is gonna stop them, right? Because these people might still look, through some healers to their friends or things like that, just because they just think that their life is so much more important. So what is not compared to at the end of this debate, Madam Speaker? We think this debate is not about whether whether this will be mutually exclusive, right? We think this debate is not about whether these things are principally better or not principally better. We think this debate is about whether you're principally justified as a state to tell people that they cannot engage somewhere. At the point where businesses do this as a malicious thing, right, we'll never stand for that, we propose.
I thank Rasmus for that speech. I would now like to move to the last team in this debate, RRIS, and and I would appreciate it if people are quiet during that.
All right, thank you everyone. So I'm going to be bringing 3 points today. My first point is going to be about the placebo effect. My second point is going to be about perpetuating a medical monopoly. And my third point is going to be about the presumption of liberty. Right? But before I do that, I'd like to engage in some rebuttal. Right? So we're hearing from side proposition essentially that the services that are being offered are essentially frauds, that they're sort of illegitimate, false claims to sort of the broad public about sort of things that they can't, services that sort of don't actually do what they're supposed to do. So we say two things in response to this. First, and this will also be elaborated in my points, there's on some level a placebo effect. Right? The idea that there are many things that don't actually drugs that are claimed to work and provide a certain thing, but are in fact just act in place of a real drug, but actually have an effect because psychologically the person thinks though and thinks it works, and so therefore their brain affects their body, and their bodies actually improve because they sort of have more sort of strength to fight the battle and that kind of thing, and so therefore they actually have health improvements, and they believe that it works, and so therefore it moves forward. We also challenge the idea that it doesn't work because, as we talked about later, there's a kind of relative standards of effectiveness, because for people who engage in these sort of treatments, they believe it works, the medical community believes it doesn't. And we don't think just because the medical community doesn't think it works, that means that the state is therefore legitimized in saying that this doesn't work, because there are different standards of evaluation, and the state doesn't have the right to declare which standard is better. We want a neutral ground for this kind of conversation. We also say, there's also claimed on side proposition, essentially, that the people who engage in these sort of services are people who are desperate and are dying of a crazy disease or cancer or something, and have exhausted all their options. We think this is a gross mischaracterization of the kinds of people who likely use these services. We think, for example, the people who use acupuncture or homeopathy are not people who are dying of deadly disease, but people who want to improve their health mostly on the margin. People who want sort of to flood their body of toxins, or to feel better, or to have better, bowel movements or something like that. And that this isn't the kind of desperate exploitation that's taking place. But even if it is, we say that the placebo effect, which we talked about, which we'll expand on in a second, will be quite powerful. Not right now. Okay, so the placebo effect, right? We know from clinical trials, right, that in many cases placebos are actually more effective than the drugs themselves, because the mind is an incredibly powerful tool and actually affects biology, right? So the psychology that of thinking that this is a drug that works affects the chemicals that actually go into your brain, and then affects the vitality and capacity of your body to fight whatever medical problem you have, right? So we say that even if these drugs don't work, right, or all these alternative practices don't work, from faith healing and any of these kinds of things, we say that the power of the placebo effect is such that it's incredible, that it's effectively, there's a kind of lack of that they sort of fulfill the requirement that side proposition is offering, because they actually sort of do what they're supposed to do, even if they don't work according to specific medical standards.
Sure.
Right? Not right now. So we say like, if it works as well as placebo, then it doesn't make a difference, and then if it doesn't work, then we're sort of at status quo, but the person hasn't been actively harmed, right? And we know that few drugs are more effective in blind trials than placebos. Right, to point two, right, perpetuating a medical monopoly. We say that the incentive structure for allowing these kinds of things is radically distorted. I'll take second in a second.
Okay.
In a second. We say that the medical monopoly is radically distorted, right? Because we say that the medical establishment benefits from the idea that these services are not available on the open market and are not available to be used by people, right? So we know, for example, that there are sort of real services that are not certified by the medical establishment, but in fact have scientific studies backing them up, but are not certified because the medical establishment has an interest in keeping these out of the market. So we know that acupuncture is scientifically verified. We know that chiropractic medicine works, and so on and so forth. And so there's an incentive for certain kinds of options to be pulled back from the system as potentially working, even though they have scientific data behind them, because they're not certified by the medical establishment, because of the medical establishment's interest in keeping them out. And we think the government is perpetuating a market monopoly in services that could be potentially useful. Yes?
Okay, placebo effect is random, meaning that you'll never know if it's going to happen or not, and it happens only in minority of cases. On the other hand, you get hundreds of individuals who are scammed every day because there's no placebo effect that was supposed to happen. All these individuals lose money and they're done.
Yeah, okay, so two things. One, we say that placebo effect is in fact much, much stronger than side proposition would have you claim. We know that in many, many clinical trials, the sort of control group of placebo effect individuals sometimes often do better than the true group that's actually getting the real drug. But we say that even if this isn't true, right, that people have a right to use something that they think works because their standards are different than other people's standards, than the medical monopoly standards, and the only way that they can know about this service if it is advertised to them as being potentially useful to them. And the medical profession and the state, following the medical profession's sort of scientific guidelines, doesn't have the right to kind of to ban these options. We think that the medical profession has often been wrong about potentially useful treatments. They used to think that sort of heroin and cocaine were useful. They used to think that antidepressants didn't work, and so forth. And so we don't have necessarily reason to actually trust that all of their particular standards for this kind of thing will take place. We think this only adds to sort of regulatory bureaucracy in which you have to sort of certify things in order to make them work. No. Okay, so part 3, right? The liberty presumption, right? We have this basic principle in sort of Western liberal democracies that consenting adults have the right to engage in any practice that does not directly harm other people and often them either, right? So essentially, people have the right to engage in all kinds of different treatments, try out different kinds of things. Things that they consider to be useful that other people might not consider useful, because we understand that people have different values and different interests, right? And that kind of people's idea of like the good life is relative, and so therefore we can't impose a specific standard. And the only way that they can know that this is a possible treatment for them is if we allow these things to be advertised and we don't ban that this could be potentially useful and not go by someone's specific standard. So the only way that we can have a kind of open marketplace of potential medical options and an open marketplace of ideas is if we allow this liberty presumption to take place. Right, so what have I talked to you about today? Right, I've talked to you about the placebo effect and how it can be just as effective and even in it doesn't make a difference. I've talked to you about how this perpetuates potentially useful practice, and I've talked to you about how we have presumption of liberty in allowing people to effectively do what they want as long as it doesn't harm other people. Thank you, and thank you to Oppose.
I thank Arkiva for that speech, and now I'd like to call upon the last speaker on the proposition side of this debate, Julia.
Ladies and gentlemen, what I hear from the opposition, I'll establish more about what I hear from the opposition is that most probably placebo effect will be quite strong, and we can rely on that. But what we just proved to you that placebo effect it applies only to few individuals, and for after that person you get hundreds or thousand people who just get scammed every day. Therefore, we think we cannot rely just on this factor. Secondly, you're talking about the values that people can hold and that values that we are kind of sacrificing. But what do you think that these values do not hold once the people are in the very bad situation? Once they have very serious illnesses. This is not the case. Moreover, once you're talking about the individual freedom and that people can have the right to use whatever they want. However, yes, basically it is true. Once there is a third-party harm, as it is in our case, because once those people are when they have those serious terrible illnesses, they start borrowing money from the families, from the parents. So basically they are. like there is a burden on those people around them. They are taking loans. So like once there is third party harm, we do think that is fine if we cross the freedom of those people to take an action, actually to use such drugs that are not satisfied, were not authorized. What I have proven on our side of the house is that by banning unauthorized healing, by banning these malpractices, we do achieve a healthier society. Even though like we are ready to sacrifice those like values or like freedoms of minor community. Like what we have discussed today is that whether the state should take an action and to decide over the individual what practices they should use. We think that it is perfectly fine. Once the person is terribly ill, he most probably he's very likely to be manipulated because he doesn't think rationally. And those companies, even firstly private companies who claim that to heal this person, which is actually might be not true. And secondly, those which the first was talking about the religious rituals, and others who claim also to heal them. Like we are perfectly fine if we cross it out, because once the person will even builds his own identity on those cultural rituals, that is very, very harmful for him if like those because like those religious this ritual they claiming to heal the person, which they cannot do. But like what I've told to you, that we're not going against religion, we're not going against those religious communities. Once they have proven that their treatment they did this medical test, and once this medical service was proved to be effective. Like what we do cross out there is the possibility that these people, like terribly ill, can be highly manipulated and get the malpractices. We do lessen the risk of them to be mistreated, because like, what we hear from the opposition, they're telling us, okay, but if such case will occur, we will just prosecute them. But that is not dealing with the problem, that is dealing with the consequences. And what we do on our side of the opposition, that we are cutting this problem, the whole possibility of being maltreated, like from the very, very beginning, and that is the impact that we do to the society, and that is like the whole part of the debate on the impact that we mean here. Yeah, I'll take it if you like.
Given that your partner admitted that in the majority of these cases, people are still going to do it anyway, the affected communities, aren't you admitting that there's no effect at all of this motion?
The thing is that but the thing is that like the percentage of these people that can do it anyway. Like firstly, because we will ban those companies who are offering them. So most probably they have two solutions: either that they will not exist at all, or they will go through all this process of authorization and will have the control over those companies who are offering them. So basically, like, we're not going into black market, but we are getting even more companies in their in the business and under the state's control. Because once you have all the medical facilities, most probably it will be even more efficient for you to go and to authorize your medical services than to go out of the business at all. So therefore we think that at this point, even if some individuals might be harmed because they build their identity of those culture like religious rituals, but we do think that it is perfectly fine once we do intervene, because we do save them from those practices they claiming to that are misleading them. Therefore, what we proved to you on our side of the government, that by banning misleading healing practices, we do have control over medical services in the state. We do have a healthier community overall, and like what we do by this motion, that we lessen the possibility of people to be maltreated, like at the very start of the problem, and like not dealing with the consequences. What the opposition side was trying to tell us. So like for the following reason, very proud to us.
I thank Julia for that speech, and would now like to call for the last speaker for the opposition and the debate as a whole, Shai.
All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you all for having me here today. It's had an interesting debate so far. Talked a lot about cultural identity, fraud, that sort of thing. And I'm going to give you a brief summary, a little bit of analysis, and focus in on why it is that second opposition has really brought to you the stronger, more convincing evidence. Now, we got from First Government, this First Government sort of would have you believe that alternative medicine providers are all snake oil salesmen who are prioritizing money over people's lives, and they would also have you believe that people choose to treat their irritable bowel syndrome the same way that they choose their shoes and their handbags, which is by turning on the TV and looking at what celebrities are doing. And we on side second opposition would say that we don't agree with this sort of characterization as alternative medicine providers as religious leaders, people who are sort of community leaders. We don't believe that these people are necessarily intentionally sort of engaging in fraud with the intent to scam people of their money and that sort of thing. Actually, we believe that engaging in these sorts of rituals and that sort of thing is often some of the most effective, not for a while, is some of the most effective treatment because, as my partner pointed out, the placebo effect is one of the most effective treatments, and oftentimes people are sort of seeking to provide comfort at the last stages for people's lives and that sort of thing, also, we would, and as First Government pointed out, I think extremely well, fraud is already illegal. So sort of the problem that they're trying to solve is not a problem. It's already dealt with by the legal status quo now. They would also basically, this whole idea about people choosing their treatment based on celebrities. Listen, under the status quo, treatments that are sort of outside of the mainstream cannot claim FDA approval. So it's not at all unclear what has mainstream state sort of scientific backing and is kind of considered to be the traditional sort of treatment. There's no lack of clarity on that issue. The sort of people who believe that vaccination causes autism and stuff like that because Catherine McCarthy said so are the same people who are going to continue to do that because they're not the kind of people who trust the government, who trust the FDA, who trust the sort of government approval that this motion is talking about. No, thank you. So, second government would, and I quote here, for religious people, the state is not the utmost authority, and so they will probably still do it, being still engaged in these sorts of practices. So basically, right from the get-go, in the very opening speech, they admitted that there's no effect whatsoever of this motion because it's not going to affect the only people that it's designed to protect. Now, they also talked about how in, quote, majority of cases affected by this issue are people that are sort of in this desperate situation on the brink of death. They've exhausted all the options that have been provided by the medical community. They've tried everything, and so we think that this is exactly the sort of situation where you really should not be taking away from these people the sort of last semblance of comfort that they have. They've already tried everything in the mainstream medicine. They've already tried what the medical doctors have to offer. It hasn't worked. Why are we denying them why are we denying them the opportunity to go to their local church, to engage in some sort of mystic practices that, if nothing else, will provide them at least some level of spiritual comfort. And basically, thank you. These people, we want to remind you that people on the brink of death like this are not rational actors, and so seeking to solve their possible chance of blowing all their money and that sort of thing through legislation basically this is an ineffective solution to the problem. And really just comes down to, it really just comes down to more limiting of freedom, basically. And we don't believe that it's the state's place to try and tell these people what they should or shouldn't do in their final moments of life. We don't ever look to the state to prevent people from taking these sorts of risks with their money. You're allowed to do extreme sports. Why can't you seek out alternative medicine? Now, so after we've had a little bit of a rebuttal in that area, we're going to move into the constructive here. I want to review some of the points my partner talked about and drive home. Now, a second government also would have you believe that the placebo effect only works for some people, which is something that doesn't really make sense to me, especially when you consider the fact that in clinical trials, the placebo has proven to be the most consistent, reliable, and effective form of treatment, so much so that at this point, they have made the placebo a sugar pill. They've made it into a sort of a registered trademark drug that is now sold by prescription, it's called Ovicalp, and if you write that down, you'll realize that it's just placebo backwards. That is the level of how effective belief is. The idea that taking a drug like this can help you, the placebo effect, the psychological effect of taking a drug like this, no thank you, is so incredibly powerful that it's prescribed. Now, and the thing is, what the government would have you do is sort of like take away. They would be trying to deny the right of people offering this sort of placebo effect, this sort of this psychological healing. They would be trying to deny them the right to claim the effectiveness of their treatment. And when you deny the effectiveness, what you're doing is undercutting the whole principle on which the placebo effect rests. You have to believe that it's going to be effective in order for it to work. And if the government is telling you, don't buy into that, it's not going to be effective, you have effectively eliminated the most effective treatment available to these sorts of people. Okay. Now, when you also take into consideration, thank you, when you also take into consideration the fact that they're also talking about banning rituals and services, as defined by the motion, that these sorts of things are basically always reliant on the placebo effect, assuming that you don't believe in that particular religion. And so basically this is a direct infringement upon religious beliefs, because they're saying that in order to engage in these sorts of religious rituals and practices and stuff like that, you would have to concretely prove that by engaging in perhaps going into a mikveh bath or doing some sort of religious ritual, that there's a physical effect. It takes a second.
Okay, so the reason why extreme sports in this case are different, because the impact, at the point where you make the decision to engage in extreme sports, you're not under severe emotional distress. But even if that doesn't matter, there's third-party harm at the point where your family spends tons of money.
Okay, thank you.
So basically,
I understand what you're saying, and we recognize that basically we believe on side opposition that people have the right to make these sorts of decisions for themselves. Now, moving into this concept of regulations, my partner brought you the national sort of regulation. The FDA is not an all-knowing thing. He brought up examples, reminded you that once upon a time, cigarettes, heroin, morphine, cocaine were all considered legitimate treatment and prescribed and had FDA approval. Now, we've seen in the past that they've erred. We have no reason to believe that in the future there will be some sort of the gold standard by which we can tell all things are okay. Now, under the status quo, basically the treatments in question, they can't claim FDA approval. So as we said, as my partner told you, it's already clear which practices fall under the umbrella of sort of modern medicine, modern science. There's no lack of clarity here. This motion basically is ineffective. And furthermore, we're perpetuating sort of the pharmaceutical monopoly, because national regulation basically is subject to extremely dense bureaucracy. They're subject to the lobbying of a few very rich companies. And as my partner mentioned to you, there are certain treatments that, because they are not profitable, for example, acupuncture, for example, chiropractic, because they're not extremely profitable with these pharmaceutical companies, because you can't sell you a pill, then they can't do anything about it. And finally, we think that one of the most important points here is the freedom idea. People choose the treatment that suits them, and as both first and government, first government and second government admitted, they will choose those treatments regardless of the motion, and therefore, because of the placebo effect, because of the regulation, we beg you to